Hey, thanks for checking out this video today about roughing in a plumbing system. Although I roughed this plumbing system in on a tiny house, I just want you to know these principles that we're going to go over today are going to apply to any kind of waistline system when in a residential setting. So if you're doing an underground system, say in a basement slab, or you're doing an overhead waistline in a basement, anything that has to do with single family residential home, these principles are definitely going to apply. All right, for those who don't know who I am, I just want a quick intro. My name's Bob Clarizio. I've been building tiny houses for the past decade. Been featured on a lot of different tiny house shows, including Tiny House Nation, Tiny House Big Living. In more recent time, I've taken a step back from all of the hustle and bustle, and I've been working solely by myself to craft some of the most amazing tiny houses I've ever had the pleasure of building. This particular tiny house that I'm building, we're going to be going through each week. And if you saw last week's video, it was all about how the floor system is built in this house. Behind me is the other half of the house. So we got this half, which is going to have the kitchen, the bathroom, the powder room, master bedroom. Over there, we're going to have another bedroom, laundry closet, living room, and then a massive walkout porch. So you're going to want to see these videos every week, because every week we're going to get a little bit more and more of this house built, and you're really going to get to see how this whole process works. I'm really happy to bring that to life for you. So, all right, back to this project and what I did this week. So we had the spray foamer out. He put 4 inches of spray foam throughout this entire unit. That gives us a 4-season cavity so that we can run all of our plumbing inside the belly of this unit. It's still on 5 axles, so it is a tiny house per se, but most tiny houses or park models are going to run the waist lines underneath the insulated floor cavity, which then you have to put a 4-season kind of skirting around the house, and it's just never really that clean. Where with this system, when you're done, we've got one pipe for the waste, and we've got one pipe for the water line, and everything else is concealed within a 4-season cavity, which means it'll never freeze or never overheat, no matter where it is in the world. So let's go over how we get started when it comes to a waistline system. You know, the first thing you're going to want to really pay attention to is your pitch. You're going to be on your farthest end away from wherever the waste is leaving the house. So you've got two ends of the system. You've got your far high side and you've got your far low side. And your far low side is where the waistline is going to leave the house, whether it's out the bottom of this tiny house, or whether it's out the side of a foundation wall, or whether it's into an injector pump pit if you're doing a basement remodel or something like that. The other side is your high point, and that's essentially where the waistline is going to start. And in our situation, it's all the way at the front of this trailer where we have a powder room vanity, and that's our highest pitch point. And why is this important? Well, the biggest reason it's important is, let's say you're running and you've got your little torpedo valve and you're measuring your 1/4 inch pitch per foot. If you don't lay this out right, you're going to run into a joist, or it's going to get wonky where you're going to have to start putting fittings in to try to step. It just becomes an absolute mess. So the first thing I do is I want to size my waistline. And we're going to go over 3-inch sizing and 2-inch and 1.5 inch, because that's what I have on this unit. I strongly recommend, for generalized code compliance questions, you go to the National Plumbing Association. You could look up standardized pipe sizing and all of that sort of stuff. So I'll leave that um, link in the description for finding plumbing codes for generalized stuff. But for my purpose, what I do is I set, so let's back up. So I got a 3-inch pipe, and that's my main waistline. And I'm going to run that as far up to my starting point as possible. And then I'm going to run it all the way till it leaves the house. So you can start with a smaller pipe depending on what your first um, point point is, and then you can get bigger as you go until it drops out of the house. So in our case, our main waistline is going to be 3-inch pipe. So what I do is I set a hanger every 4 feet. And what that does is that allows me to measure the hangers in 1-inch increments. Because remember, I said it's a 1/4 inch per foot. So if I got 4 feet, then I can drop the hanger every 4 feet by 1 inch. And then I don't have to mess around with the level or anything. So I start at the furthest point away from where it's going to leave the house. And I tend to get that pipe pretty tight. I mean, I might leave like an inch away from that the bottom of that joist, but then that's where I'm going to set my first hanger. And then from there, I'll set my next hanger. So in this case, this hanger is at 3 inches. This hanger is at 2 inches. And there's little notches on the sides of the hangers in 1-inch increments for this reason. Because part of the code as well is you need to have support within 5 feet or every 5 feet. And you really should have support within 2 feet of any fitting. I try to get within a foot of a fitting just so that it takes that weight off of those main connection points. Once you've kind of figured out your waistline, and I'm going to talk from both perspectives now. So in the sense of laying out your waistline, all rules still apply. Now, if you're doing a residential home where you're kind of where you're roughing in the waistline from the ceiling, let's say, you should first be stubbing down all of your fixtures. So your toilet closet collar should be cut through the floor. Your vanity should be stubbed through the floor. Your kitchen sink, your washer, your all your stuff should be plumbed down through into the basement or into the final floor plane of the house. If you're gonna like you so even in a crawl space, you want to stub everything down and then run your main line, because then what you'll do is you'll lay that main line out and then you'll stub up and connect to all these points. In an underground situation, similar to the way I had to rough this plumbing in, you're going to be heavily reliant on a level and string or 2x4s. You're going to want to try, you got to lay, because what you have to do is you have to land all these points in the walls. So you kind of have to do some simple carpentry layout so that you can get these different fixture points within the walls. And then what I'll do is I stub enough up so that they can be cut down and put a coupling on or extended, but I never like leave them like 5 feet high, because two things. One, it's a real pain in the ass to lift a whole wall of up 5 feet to then slide down. So I try to keep them kind of low. And the second reason is they'll break. Like somebody will knock into it, especially if it's PVC. Now, if it's a cast iron and you're in an underground situation where you got cast iron, um, that that's a little different because it's a lot tougher. Now, a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but some people like to just leave the coupling, like a fitting, just flush with the floor. And then they'll put a plug in it or whatever. And then after the wall's set, then they'll glue it and then extend their pipe into the fitting. I personally don't like this because I've been buried before. So when you have everything flush to the floor and the carpentry is going faster than expected, the framing, I should say, it's real easy to cover up those pipes. And then once you cover it up, it's like you forget about it. You don't see it, out of sight, out of mind. And then, worst case scenario, it's finish day and you're trying to install the vanity and you've got no freaking exit point, and you also got no vent. It's a freaking nightmare. So I try to leave some stub up. All right, the next thing that I'm going to do is I start to place my large fittings. So my 3x2 Ys, I try to use only Ys. I try not to, when I'm attaching to my main drain, I only use Ys. So the Y is the fitting, that's got 3-inch, 3-inch, and then it's got a 2-inch extension off the side, or maybe it's 3, 3, and 3. And the reason I use those is because I want to angle the direction of the flow of the water downstream. And when you use, say, a T, it creates extra turbulence. So it's only in like a very weird situation or super tight situation that I need to use a T. And it's typically when it was poor planning, because 9 times out of 10 I can get a Y into the main waistline, especially when you're dealing with a single family home. You don't have a ton of connection points, so um, setting up that smooth flow for the water and for the vents. So the one thing I will say is about venting is you want to make sure that the vent direction is in the direction of the Y. You don't want it to go and loop around. All right. So now we take it a little further. So when it comes to gluing the fittings, I'm not going to get into too much detail because depending on what part of the country you're in, or part of the world for that matter, you're going to have different types of glue, primers, stuff like that. But in most cases, um, you've got a purple primer and clear glue. And the reason you got the purple primer is so that during inspection, inspectors can see that you're priming your joints, because it's the only piece of the puzzle that's that purple color. So it's really easy for um, inspectors to identify, what you're doing and say, okay, well, he's priming his joints, stuff like that. All right. So where do we place a vent in our in our run? So where do we need vents, especially when we're doing a waistline system like this? So in a toilet situation, or a shower, you want to be within 6 feet. I try to get the point of entry for that vent. And for those of you who don't know what the vent is, um, you might not want to be taking on this intense of a situation, but I'll just go through some venting stuff. So if you've ever tipped over a 2 liter bottle of whatever, or a milk jug, and you get that lug, glug, 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 glug as the water or the liquid is kind of bubbling out the bottom. It has no vent, so that sound you're hearing is air trying to get through the liquid to the top of that bottle. So the easiest way to explain this is if you tip that over and you were to poke a hole in the top, that water would come flying right out. That's the vent portion of this. So we want to prevent the same kind of phenomenon from happening in our drain system. So we need to get a vent within 6 feet. Now, the only place where that really applies is tubs and showers, where it becomes difficult to get by the P-trap or whatever. So you got to get that vent as close as possible. Now, it's from the trap, and that's important to note. So if you're in a toilet situation, you've got to keep in mind that the closet collar is not where the P-trap is. It's another foot and a half or so up into the actual fixture of the toilet. And then from that point, then you'd measure out 6 feet, and you want to be within 6 feet. And my suggestion, or just my rule of thumb, is get the vent as close as possible, as close as you can. And sometimes you have a toilet out in the middle of, a big bathroom. It's not easy to get to a wall. So you might have to go like 5 or 6 feet. But if you can get closer, strongly recommend it. It's just best practice. Speaking of toilets, this house has a $10,000 Kohler Numi 2.0 toilet. It's basically a car wash for your butt. It's got a heated seat. It's got ambient lighting. It has front and rear nozzles for washing. I think you got to dry off, but you shouldn't have to wipe. And then it also has a pre-misting feature where it mists the inside of the bowl so that, you know, things don't stick to the side of that bowl when they go down. Oh, by the way, when you walk by this toilet, and I'm really excited to install this thing, but when you walk by the toilet, the seat lifts up automatically. So I thought that was super dope. Like, so you don't even have to lift the seat. And then there's also like it'll play music to like hide the sounds. Like I guess like birds chirping or something, or like some peaceful rain to help you, you know, get the flow going. I don't know. All I know is the toilet's super expensive. The house was pretty much designed around it, and it's one of the coolest features of the home. And I'm really excited to be able to install that and kind of swipe in front of it a couple of times. And hopefully, when I'm installing it, I don't get sprayed in the face or anything. So, anyways, it's obviously coming way down the road, but at least you get to see a little bit of an idea of what it is, see some pictures and so forth. So, all right, so that's enough about that. Okay, so when you're stubbing up for a vanity or a kitchen sink, all you need to get up out of the floor is the drain portion. Because what you're going to do is after the walls are built, or you might have already done this, because if you are stubbing down in a traditional rough-in situation, then you'll probably have run your vents first, and then you'll run down into the basement and pick up all your stubs. In our case, we're stubbing up. So we're doing the opposite process. So we're stubbing up the drains, and then later we're going to do all the venting, which then goes through the ceiling and out through the roof. All right. Should we move on to the water? Did I forget anything? Oh, what are all these like red cap bobbers? Okay, so we want to put test plugs in everything. Two reasons we do this. We put test plugs in so that nobody drops any shit down the, well, they can drop that down later when the house is finished. But for right now, we don't want anything going into the pipes that are going to cause a clog. Like nobody wants to bring a roto rooter in on the job before it's even done. So we want to cap those off to make sure nothing falls down there. And the other reason is we need to seal the whole system so that we can air test it. And now with this system, we want to run about 5 to 8 pounds. That's about all I would run through a PVC system. You'll start blowing joints if you get too high. It needs to be able to hold air at a decently low pressure, like 5 to 8 pounds, and then we know that it won't leak water. And that's the easiest way to play that out. All right. As far as fittings and as far as how to know what fitting to use, I would just buy like 3 times more fittings than you actually need. And then I like to organize them in like little crates based on size, because you're not going to know. You can plan and plan and plan and plan, and as Mike Tyson will say, then you get punched in the face. Uh, so you don't know what you know, or what you don't know what you don't. You get the idea. There's a lot of trial and error when it comes to roughing in PVC pipe. The PEX super easy compared to this. So, but you definitely want to run your main waistlines first before you start running water piping. Reason being, the the PVC just gets in the way. Like it's the most rigid out of anything you're going to put in. So you want to get that out of the way before you move on to the PEX. All right, let's talk about PEX piping. Um, that's what we're using in this house. It's pretty much accepted everywhere in the country except major cities still require copper, and even them are phasing it out. I think PEX is incredibly resilient and great. I've done tests in the past where I've put water inside of a PEX pipe, capped it off, and thrown it in the freezer. And it might expand like twice its size, but it never like bursts open. And so it's very resilient. You still don't want to subject it to that kind of environment, but it just gives you a little bit about how tough it is. So the other nice thing about PEX is there's red and there's blue. And obviously red for hot, blue for cold. And I like to keep the red on the left side and the right side be blue. And it's the same thing when I stub out of a wall, whatever I'm facing, because 9 times out of 10, that's the way that it comes down out of the fixtures. Speaking of fixtures, in this house, this also has we got this fancy toilet. We got to have some fancy shower valves. So the shower valve in this house is a 6-port Kohler Smart shower fixture. And so it'll have a digital LED screen inside the shower area, but the actual valve where all the water changes over and everything will actually be in separate wall outside of the shower. And for that, we've had to run 1 inch supply lines to the valve because it pulls so much volume. Like if you're open all 6 ports at one time, it would need that much volume of water. So let's go over a couple of different things that we have here. So volume, pressure. We've heard both terms. How do they apply to this? So volume is very important when you're laying out your plumbing fixtures. Most of your faucets, toilets, they're all going to require a 1 inch or a ½ inch supply line. Now, you can only run that ½ inch line 10 feet, and I try to stay under 10 feet. And the reason for that is because you'll have volume drop. So let's say somebody is washing their hands and somebody else is flushing the toilet. At that point, you'll see the water, lose volume and then come back once the toilet's flushed. If you're in a situation where the piping wasn't done correctly. So you always elevate your pipe size by a 1/4 inch from wherever you need to go. So let's say we're feeding the bathroom. We got 2 3/4 pipes. Then we got 2 vanities. Well, those vanities are within 10 feet of the proximity of the 3/4. So we run ½ inch to those. However, the cold line going to the toilet has to be 3/4 before it gets to the first vanity. After the first vanity, it can be reduced to half because we've got a fixture in the way. So supply a fixture with ½ inch pipe within 10 feet, then we want to change to a different size, 3/4 in this case. The rest of the fixtures are all supplied with 3/4. But the main water line coming into the house that's going to go to the shower, to the hot water heater, that's all 1 inch. From that point, we ran 3/4 the rest of the way. The 1 inch piping is an anomaly, but because there's an on-demand water heater and the 6-port valve, it's basically 6 faucets in one. So it's like it's hitting you from everywhere, right? All right. Once we got everything laid out, what I like to do is I run my PEX all the way, like in a basement situation or in a residential house, I would run it from one end all the way to the other, like not stop. Just run the whole damn thing and strap it to the ceiling. Lay your spacing out either 4 inches or 8 inches. 8 inches is nice because the crimper can fit between the PEX. So I like to run the PEX at 8 inches apart from each other, but I will run them continuously the whole length. And then when it comes to teeing in all my tees, that's where I just come back and I just cut out the section of the PEX where I need to put the tee in. But get your layout done, and then you can start bringing all your stuff to it. Now, in our case, again, we're stubbing up. So wherever we needed to stub up into a wall, like for a vanity or for a toilet or for a kitchen sink or a bathroom, we want to just stub up as minimal as possible. And definitely don't have like any arches and stuff. Just stub straight up so that the wall can sit on it. Now, when it comes to pressure testing the system, you're going to have a loop somewhere in the system. And then same thing applies. We want to run air through our system. And in this case, we run about 100, 90 to 100. I try to keep it at 100, but I want it to hold 90 for 24 hours. Like I don't want it leaking. And I know the plumbing standard is a little less than that. I think it's 80, but this PEX can hold 200 psi. So the fitting joints are where you're going to have problems, but you definitely want to do this for a decent amount of time. Like give it 24 hours of a test. And I have these placed in this location because this is a kitchen cabinet that jets out from the wall. So during the entire rough framing and flooring and all basically the entire project up until kitchen cabinets, this area will not get messed with. So once we get the plywood in next week, then I'll build like a little box that'll protect this, but then that'll just stay there and it should hold pressure the entire length of the job. Um, and so, I mean, it's not necessary, but it's definitely a peace of mind when you crack that thing open and it sprays air out and you know that the whole thing is solid. Um, well, hey, listen, thank you for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Be sure to leave your comments and questions, whatever I didn't cover, whatever you'd want more information on in below. Next week, we're doing all the electrical home run wiring for the units. We're going to go over all of that, and then we're also going to sheet the bottom of the unit and also put all the AC line sets. Those will also go through the floor along with the coax cables and the internet and all that stuff. And like always, like, comment. If you're not subscribed to this channel, please do so and follow this project all the way to the end each week. And I will see you next time.